According to Scotland's 2011 census, nearly 2 million people have some Scots language skills. But what is this language we call Scots, and where did it come from? Scots has many different names: Scots, Scotch, Broad Scots, Lowland Scots, even Lallans. It's spoken in the United Kingdom, mainly in the Central Belt and in the northeast of Scotland, but also in Orkney and Shetland, and in Galloway, the Borders, Caithness and other parts. Scots is also spoken in pockets of Ulster. The earliest identifiable languages of the UK are Celtic in origin. We can recognise two types: Goidelic, which is the predecessor of Irish Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic and Manx, and Brittonic, whose descendants include Welsh, Cornish and the now extinct Cumbric. When the Romans first arrived in Britain, they encountered several tribes speaking varieties of Brittonic. To the north of Hadrian's Wall were the Picts, whose language was probably a type of Brittonic. We know very little about Pictish, and what we do know comes mainly from place names scattered across the north and east of Scotland, such as place names beginning Pit. After the Romans left, a different Celtic group, this time of Irish origin, made its way into Pictish territories. These raiders, who the Romans called Scotti, settled in the west of Scotland, then part of the kingdom of Dalriada. They were speakers of Old Irish, a Goidelic form of Celtic and the ancestor of present-day Scottish Gaelic. Meantime, in the south, from the middle of the 5th century, following the Romans' departure, waves of Angles, Saxons and Jutes crossed the Channel. Settling first in East Anglia, Kent and the south, these settlers spoke closely related varieties of West Germanic. Within a few generations, these Anglo-Saxons had spread westwards and northwards, reaching the Lothians in the 6th century. Their language, usually termed Old English, had 4 main dialects: Northumbrian, Mercian, Kentish and West Saxon. The 2 northernmost dialects, collectively termed Anglian, were a crucial component in the development of Scots. There was, of course, no Scottish nation in the 6th century. Instead, the kingdom of Northumbria extended as far north as the Firth of Forth, with the Picts and Gaels holding sway to the north. Next came the Vikings. In the north and east of England, Danes established the Danelaw, a large area under autonomous rule. In northern Scotland and in the northern and western Isles, Norwegians raided and settled. The area of densest Scandinavian presence in England is often referred to by linguists as the Great Scandinavian Belt. Here, the local dialects of English took on many Norse words. Many of these words are now part of Standard English, for example, sky, egg and take, and the pronouns they, them and their. Others have survived as more local terms, for example, Northern lug and lass. Busy with the Vikings further south, the English-speaking Northumbrians were unable to hold their northern border and eventually ceded Lothian to what had become the Gaelic-speaking Kingdom of Alba. But although Scottish Gaelic was by then the dominant language over most of Scotland, Anglian dialects persisted in most of the lowlands. After 1066, England came under Norman rule, and French became the language of those in charge. Scotland was never invaded by the Normans, but the Scottish royal court did feel its influence. King David I married Matilda, the great niece of William the Conqueror, and awarded Scottish lands and positions of power to members of the Anglo-Norman elite. The Scottish Normans, who came mainly from the north of England and East Midlands, brought with them large numbers of followers. Many of these followers were English speakers from the old Danelaw area, which meant that their English was heavily influenced by Scandinavian. King David also established royal boroughs, towns with special trading privileges, which became magnets for the nobility and for peasants, traders and craftsfolk. They attracted people from the north of England and from abroad, particularly from the Low Countries. Did you know that Scots has many words adopted from Dutch, including loon, and keek. So day-to-day speech in the Scottish boroughs brought together different measures of Gaelic, local Anglian, Scandinavian-influenced English and Dutch. Unfortunately, most surviving documents written in Scotland before the end of the 14th century are written in Latin. This makes it very difficult to trace how the language we know today as Scots emerged from this linguistic morass. What we can say, though, is that the most significant component in the makeup of Scots is Old English, be it the local Anglian dialect of the Lothians or the Scandinavian-influenced English of the Danelaw. Much of the formal, courtly and legal vocabulary of early Scots, by contrast, was adopted from French and Latin. North of the Forth, Gaelic speakers were much more numerous. As a result, the northwards and westwards spread of Scots was slow, especially outside the boroughs. This is one reason why the dialects of those areas differ from those of the central belt. By the 17th century, changes in the relationship between Scotland and England had caused Scots to lose much of its prestige. As a written language, Scots increasingly gave way to English once London became the linguistic centre of gravity. As a spoken language, many Scots found it advantageous to conduct their affairs in English instead. Unable to shake off their Scots pronunciations entirely, however, the variety of English they converged on is now generally referred to as Scottish English. But as a spoken language, and one which is often represented in its various dialects in written works, Scots endures and continues to evolve. It is, without a doubt, a Germanic language at its core, and its closest ties are to English. Still, it carries with it the richness of the many layers of languages and peoples that Scotland has brought together over the ages.